Wednesday panel now. Now, late debate co-host Liz Storer joins Chris at this time every week, as does columnist Justin Smith. Quick look at the budget, guys. The Prime Minister promised this during the election campaign and again on election night. Have a look.
During this campaign, I have put forward a positive, clear plan for a better future for our country. And I have shared the two principles that will drive a government that I lead. No one left behind, because we should always look after the disadvantaged and the vulnerable.
Incredibly, that's almost a year ago, 22nd of May, Justin, coming up just around the corner. Out of 10, do you think the Albanese government has honoured that list of promises?
Well, it's probably one of those things that the rhetoric's all good and he talks a good game and so does the Treasurer, but it's probably not something we'll really get a clear idea of until the Reserve Bank meets again, but probably also not for about another year out. I mean, it doesn't look like a bad budget, and as far as this little mini surplus thing we've got going on, they do have some bragging rights, but, you know, we'll see. We'll see where it's at in a year.
Liz, the one thing that we haven't got was the big promise, of course, that was made that power bills will go down by $275. No one's got that, and in fact, they're still going up.
Still waiting for that one to go down, and the measures in the budget don't attack the core issues. It's just handouts, totally Band-Aid. Elastoplast should really file some sort of copyright suit here when it comes to this budget. I think it's a welfare budget. That's what it is. Socialists love making people more dependent on the state, and they're darn good at it. What was most notably missing from the budget was any sort of plan to tackle inflation, in which case you're leaving everyone behind, Albo, because we're all feeling that pinch. And it's no small thing that Australia's got the highest core inflation out of any advanced economy in the world at the moment. No plan to tackle that in the budget, though. For shame.
Justin, I was looking at some population movement figures today, and people are leaving Melbourne. They're deserting Sydney, according to this study. Many of them headed for sunny Queensland. We saw that in the 1980s, and a lot of people came back because they found life in Queensland wasn't quite what they thought.
Yep.
But the one community which is going to be the biggest boost of numbers in any community, the ACT, Canberra. I wonder why that would be. Do you think it might be that 10,000 extra public servants this government is going to hire in the next 12 months?
Look, that could be it. I mean, there could be another reason. I see a study that says that people's IQs drop when they get COVID. Maybe so many people have had COVID now and their IQs have dropped and they want to move to Canberra. I can't imagine, even with the weather that we had in Melbourne today, I can't imagine why anyone would pack up and go to Canberra. But anyway, best of luck to them. But your theory is a good one, I would think.
I'm a defender of Canberra, Liz. My daughter studied university there and I've spent a lot of time. But, you know, we have also seen today in the budget, every MP, every senator is going to get an extra office staff member in their electorate office, and they're going to change this little thing where they could only send one staff member at a time to sitting weeks in Canberra. From now on, they can all go. All 5 can jump on a Qantas plane and fly from Melbourne or Brisbane or Canberra and spend 2 weeks in Canberra at our expense.
And having been a staffer for 8 years myself, state and federal, upper house and lower house, Steve, we are talking about an astronomical amount of money that this would cost. The taxpayer needs to understand this is all the accommodation, you get a food allowance, you get the flights, obviously, they're all thanks to the taxpayer. And having done that trip a great many times, there is just no way any member of parliament needs 5 members of staff with them. It's utterly ridiculous that this is even being made an option.
How are the bars of Canberra going to cope with that? They're crowded at the best of times during sitting week, aren't they? You'd know.
Yes, indeed. I'm sure they're licking their lips. This is going to be a great influx for them. Indeed, on long weekends and the rest of it, Canberra is absolutely dead because everyone leaves to go back to wherever they're from, and it makes for a very strange demographic in Canberra itself. I lived there for 2 years, and the vast majority of people are just ticking a box on the resume, doing some time in Canberra. It's actually quite rare you meet an actual Canberran. So it doesn't make for a good demographic at all.
Justin, $365 million in the budget that will go toward the setup toward the referendum. This is not the money that we'll be spending to actually stage the referendum. This is a whole lot of money that will go into education, into various community groups so that they can better understand what's going on. That's a hell of a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but these things are going to cost a lot of money. I think it was the same-sex plebiscite, same-sex marriage plebiscite was around about $500 million to have that as well. These things are going to cost money, and it's one of those things, it'll either get criticised or it'll get praised, depending on whether you agree with it or not. But every time you do something like this, it's going to cost a fortune. I mean, have a look at any government spending. Look at these 5 staff members. Everything costs a ruddy fortune, and this was always going to be the case. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have it.
No, it doesn't. But, I mean, we're going to constantly see more money, Liz, pushed into this, because if you're going to do it, you have to do it properly. And so when we actually get to the date, whenever that might be, that we go and vote on this referendum, that's going to cost a heap of money.
Absolutely. It turns out enshrining racial privilege in the Constitution is very expensive, Steve. Who knew? But this is basically a referendum that the Australian people themselves never asked for. So to be handed a bill this big, and like you've said, this isn't actually for the referendum to be carried out itself. This contains things like $10.5 million for the mental health of Indigenous Aussies during this time. Of course, the government are really strongly pushing this idea that this should be traumatic for them, something I disagree with greatly. But I think this is a real slap in the face to the taxpayer, A, when we're all doing our utmost just to make ends meet as it is, and B, when we know full well that we spend over $40 billion every year, pouring it into less than 3% of the population to address the real systemic issues in those communities.
No wonder they need help with mental health when you make comments like that.
Gaslighting people into believing is going to make a difference when all that money didn't. Being told that they don't have a voice when we know full well there's 12 Indigenous members of Parliament in the federal contingent, which is actually quite an over-representation of less than 3% of the population if you crunch the numbers. And we're supposed to just be gaslit into believing the fact that this is going to change everything, despite the fact that we've been spending a lot of money on it already. And in doing so, we're not just throwing this money out willy-nilly. The government has always very closely liaised with uncountable Indigenous bodies in the spending of those funds. We are being gaslit, Steve. We're still waiting for any details as to how this voice is going to exact a fraction of the wonderful, magical changes the government keeps promising that it will, should it get up.
Justin, I know you support the referendum, and that everyone's entitled to their view, but in that $365 million, as Liz mentioned, there is money to help on the mental health aspect of Indigenous people who might be triggered during this referendum debate. How does that go down with the parent of a child who's had mental health issues since COVID and can't get an appointment with a psychiatrist?
Well, look, I mean, I think that's a different issue, and it's not a different issue. I actually agree with you. I think there should be both.
It's a mental health issue.
Because I think the way that this government, the way that this current government knocked on the head those 10 extra visits while COVID is still going on, and while people still desperately need mental health. Yeah, I agree with you. It shouldn't be ditched, but we should also be having it for the Indigenous people who need it as well. I mean, who the hell are we, the three of us? Who are we to say that they shouldn't be getting extra help during this time. They should be getting as much of it as they possibly can.
It's more the assumption, Justin, that the government has put this in there to further drive home the point that, oh, this is going to be needed because Australia's so racist and they're going to cop a lot of horror. That is simply not true.
Absolute twaddle.
It has already been said dozens of times as a justification for a whopping $10.5 million on mental health alone. It is absolutely unjustifiable.
So are you trying to tell me that the Indigenous people of Australia don't deserve $10 million spent on their mental health?
No.
Is that what you're really trying to tell me?
No. No, Liz is not saying that, and neither am I. What I'm saying is we have a mental health issue in this country that is not being looked at for everybody, and yet we put in the budget this amount of money to help one group. This is the whole division thing that Liz is talking about. Got to wrap it up, guys. Liz Storer, thank you very much. Justin Smith, thank you very much.